So next for us, I have the information in another CSV file that I want to be able to manipulate for each user, the users being the taxi driver who is logging in. So again, I've got a backup of this information. I've added some new users, so I'm just going to fix that on this one to capital test, so that should be okay on yours. So basically, the user the username must exist basically, and I guess a better example here really would be using a database for this and then having a unique reference code for each one. So I'm just going to save that and also save it to the original one because it's the backup I have open. So yours will look identical to that. Right information we want. So that looks like that. You can see from the information that we have in the users that I've added in this admin account, which is admin and private. So that's what I'm going to work on at the moment. I want to go from this login frame to really go to an admin account and just basically display every little bit of information in that table or in a table essentially. Again, not going to worry about it looking great. So at this point I want to create a new JFrame form and I'll call it admin frame. And when that loads, I'll just pop a label on there so we know what it is. Change that. I'm not worried about the video name for now. Again, probably a good idea to do that. Now what I want on here is a table which I'm going to set up. So I'll drag that over. You can see from the CSV file that we have the four points on it anyway. So we change the video name, JTable all data, I'll just call it. And again, going into table contents, right clicking table contents and choosing columns. I guess that's driver code on that one, or username. The next one is the user code. The next one is distance. And the final one was the time taken for that. So you'll see that will update those titles. What I want to have on here is similar to the others. I'm going to put in the exit button, which again isn't going to look great because I don't have any color schemes or anything like that, or any nice fonts. Change that variable name, JButton exit. And again, right click, choose the properties so that we can't just quit, because we may want to save changes on that X. Double click on the X and add in system.out.println, system.exit 0 rather, to quit the system. We can do any other code before exit there, whether we need to save it, whatever it happens to be. So what this form's intended for is just to show all the information that's in the system. So we need to do file read and then display in table. Now to do that, I am going to create a new class to store every single ride in an array list basically. So I want a Java class that's going to be a ride, and our instance variables, we have a private string driver code, private string user code, we have a private double distance, and a private double time. I'll just check, could be integer for time, I think I rounded it, yeah. So the time will be an integer, just rounded up to the nearest minute. Again, it's just completely made up. It's a private int time. We want a constructor here, and again we could use polymorphism if we want, but I only really need one constructor here, which is going to take in string driver, string user, double, distance, and int t for time. Fix that back to lowercase for double. This dot driver code equals d. This dot user code equals u. This dot distance equals d. This dot time equals t. Semicolon. Let's check out the errors I've got. Double, can't revert to string. Used it twice, so there's a good error. If I wasn't being lazy, we could just do that. Fix that error there because the data, I was using d for both variables at that point, so that wouldn't work. Want the usual accessors for all of these. So public string get driver, return driver code, public string get user. Now this is where if you've got class diagrams and are able to use code generators online, you wouldn't actually have to type this information out. You can get it automatically generated from your class diagrams. Private double get distance, return distance. I'm going to have a second one, private string get distance string, just so I can display it easier. So we can return string dot value of, and inside that we want to put distance, and that will save us having to convert it an extra step out with this class. Obviously I didn't mean to make that private. I want to have it as public, and then same for the last one's public and get time, return time, and public string get time string. Same principle again, return string dot value of time, and a nice straightforward code for our accessors there. Possibly want mutators later, and some calculation private methods if we want to do anything with a particular object in here, so we'll add them if we need them. So back to the admin frame now. What we want to create, again, similar to what we've been using in the previous areas, is a private array list of write, which we'll just call writes equals new array list. And again, we need to import that. And that's a classic one that comes up in the questions, actually, of how to define a new array list of a certain type. So it's really worth knowing that. And also the difference between using a dynamic data structure like an array list rather than an array. So at this point, we don't know how many writes it will be. So we have the ability to dynamically grow and shrink that data. So I want to read file, and I'll just add that here, and it's a private method with no return. So read file. Now I'm going to be lazy. I am going to go back to my login frame, and I'm going to borrow this code, but I've got to be really careful, mainly because it's accessing a different file. So we then go back to the admin frame, get all the imports sorted. Now all users as rides, I believe we called it, and the information CV, and to just double check the name, is ride information. So you can see just how much, or rather how little, is changing for file read to file read. So you can see there we've got a write temp this time that takes in all that data. So first one's a string, no issue. Second one's a string, no issue. The last one, we need to parse it as an integer in order to store it because it's a string. Or rather, we need to do string.value of, something the opposite I'm thinking, to convert that into a string. Let's try and do this slower. When we create a new write, we cannot pass in this because it's there's one error, but right. When we put the constructor in, it's probably best to just double check what it needs. It needs a string, double integer. Now data 0 from file reading and data 1 don't need to be converted to string. Data 2, however, is a string, so at this point it needs to be converted to a double, which we can use the parse double, and then similarly we can do integer dot parse int, and then data 3 should allow us to create that temp object. Do rides dot add temp. I can delete these here. That was just a comment from the other one. So now that's adding them all to the array list. We'll get these errors appearing just about the whole Java file not found exceptions, and the same with the throws exceptions for the input-output exceptions, same as we had in the previous task. So we could see if you go back to the top, we need to throw that clause exception for input-output again on the constructor for a public admin frame. Similar to last time, I want a new private method which is going to display a table. We may create a second one later, so public display table. And again, this could be something you made in a rides class to return a table just to display it. Public void display table. So the code for your default table models is pretty much always the same as well, but now I would have this bunch of rides for the array list that I can loop through and use and manipulate and add. So we need to get the default table model, which is what we were setting up earlier, with the rows and the titles. This dot and our table was called jtable all data, and we need to get the model of that. So that basically just copies the number of columns that you added in. So we need to import that package so we can use it. Model.set row count to 0 erases everything that's in the table essentially. And then we need to have a new object array, which is a row of objects which is size 4 columns. So if you've got different numbers of columns, then you would adjust that. And we want to look for each ride in the array list. So you can use a for loop for that, for int I equals 0, I is less than rides.size, I plus plus. And again, that's a classic, that and a while loop come up in the exam all the time for manipulating array lists. What do we want to do? We want to add row 0 is obviously the driver code, so we can do equals rides.get I dot get driver. Row 1, these all need to be strings, which is why I made those methods earlier. So we want to get user, which is a string, row index 2. Now it's not row 2, this is column 2 of this particular row, rides.get I dot get and it's distance first, which I want returned as a string, and then row 3 equals rides dot get I dot get time string. Okay, so once we've got all that information there, we can then add that to our row, which we just literally add to the model. So we do model dot add row, and then the row. Which would automatically be put on there. Now, what might be useful is like a filter later, so we can display from individual users or individual drivers. So this should work, except when I try and log in as admin. And let's see where we've got the errors. Yeah, we've got that problem again here. So again, this main part never needs to be executed, so I'm just going to remove that at the bottom. And we can see when it starts, if admin, looking at our list, capital A and then private is our password. So admin private, hit login, it takes us not to the admin frame because the table's not there. This is actually the user screen, and that's because we've not told it how to take us to the admin frame from the login frame. So we can go and manipulate that part we've got earlier, where we are checking the passwords correct and so on. So found equals true here. I found this true. All users compare passwords here. This is the part that creates a user for user frame. So we need to go back here and check if account is admin, open admin frame, else open user frame. So if at this point the username, what we have here already stored from the table, check the passwords of username dot equals, check my spelling, admin. We want to do that part, otherwise they're obviously just a normal user, so we can create the logged in one, and we'll just do the same thing. In fact, I'll just cheat and speed things up. I will copy my code to make a logged in user, except I will change it to admin frame, AF equals new admin frame, no arguments that it needs, set location to null, set it visible, and dispose of the login frame. And in the same previous problems we had, just putting a try-catch around the parts that require file reading so that it catches any exceptions. And some people previously commented these out. We don't want to do that. We want to have the errors printed out so we can figure out if we have any errors, where they're coming from. So going back to the exit button, that would just exit the system. I don't see the need for the admin frame to have any special functionality where we can jump back and forward between anything. So now when we do admin, and the password was private, and click the login button, you can see now it takes us to the admin frame, and the table is visible this time. They're not logged in as a user. Now we've only got one row, which we'll need to check and see. So it looks like we've only got one particular row. Now it'd be interesting to see which one that is. U07111512, distance 1.5. So it's only displaying the last item from that list. So let's go back and look at the admin frame to see what's happening there. Adding temp to the list there and to the table. And the reason it's doing that is because I have this add row outside the loop, so that's why we only got the last one. So if we put that back where it should be, which is inside the loop, so it will only happen once, and test that again. This time, login is admin, the username private, click login, and now we can see all of the data in there. So it'd be very easy to loop through that, calculate the total distance driven by all the drivers, calculate the time taken for the drivers, calculate the driver who's driven the longest distance. There's so much potential for manipulating that data that we could do. We can eventually get this that you can trigger it. When you click on a row, you can carry out specific actions, but that lets us see that that is working correctly the way we want it. So some of the other good features you can put on this is you could have the combo box. Now I want to have, combo box, change variable name, jcombo box underscore drivers, and what I want to do is when this is initialized, I want to remove all options from combo box. I better go back and get my code, change the variable name, so it's jcombo box drivers, jcombo box drivers dot, and then we'll need to remove all items. So if I just show you what happens when we do that, it usually has a default, some default values. So let's do admin private and login. You can see that there's no values selectable in there, and what I want to do is just add all the driver codes to it, and then be able to select them and only display those from that list. So for that, when we are doing the read file, we want to add, or we can do it at any point really, we can add this driver code to the drop down list jcombo box drivers. Now you'll see that that might not work for duplicates, so we'll need to investigate this code a little bit so we can use a loop. So I'm going to pause the video at this point so that it's not getting too long for people to watch it. So at this point, if you can get the admin form working, displaying a combo box list, then we'll pick it up with that next.